Alright, so we've got Sparmax, the manufacturer, dual action, which is what we also call double action, and double action meaning we get it in a nice little case. A little plastic case. It's very handy because it is a precision tool and you want to be able to protect it. End is, so that's the 0.3mm part of it. Hello, I'm BJ from Hearns Hobbies and I'll be taking a closer look at the Sparmax Max-3. Now this is an airbrush which is very, very popular because it's got some really good features for a really economical price. So let's see what we get with it. All right, what do we have here? All right, so we've got Sparmax, the manufacturer, dual action, which is what we also call double action, and double action meaning we've got control through the trigger, which is when you press down, you control the air pressure, and when you pull it back, you control the paint flow with the needle. Max series is really popular because it gives you all the features you need, really good performance for a really good price. Now on the side, we've got the MAX-3, which is a different model. That's got a 0.25mm nozzle, so fine work with a smaller cup, as you can see here. But we're going to be looking at this one, which is the MAX-3, as is indicating right there. 0.3mm nozzle, 7mm color cup, which is pretty standard. Preset handle. So the preset handle I'll show you in a moment. It allows you to control how far you can pull the trigger. Gives you a little bit more control if you don't need the full adjustment of the paint flow. And also 1/8 fitting, which is pretty standard on most Japanese style airbrushes. All right, let's open it up and see. Oh, it also includes this little feature. It's from dual action and you can convert it to single action, and that's with this valve. So it's not like the old school single action where you couldn't control the paint flow and you can on the airflow. This is actually the opposite. This will lock the airflow to full power, but you'll still have full control of the paint flow. All right, let's have a look. What do we get? We get it in a nice little case. Now, little plastic case. It's very handy because it is a precision tool and you want to be able to protect it. So we've got a little click opening and then it's all hinged. And there we go. There is our Max-3. There's the optional single action air pressure valve. And we've got a little tool here, which is your nozzle tool, which is very important. And then we have the airbrush itself. All right, so what do we get? Let's have a closer look. Here we go. You see it has quite thick chroming, which is good. That's good for protecting the brass which the airbrush will be made out of, and also help in cleaning. Quite a large 7mm cup there for your paint. You'll have the press-on cap. Now quite often I don't use a cap, just so I can see the level of the paint, but it is safer to use a cap, and the caps should always have that little hole there, which I'll show you a bit later when I take it off. Now here's your basic operation of it. It's all in the trigger. Okay, so we're pressing it down for controlling of the air pressure, and you're pulling back to control how much paint is flowing. Now this is what is called a gravity feed airbrush. So the cup is on top of the airbrush. When the paint is loaded, it naturally feeds through here with the help of gravity pulling it down. The other option is either side feed, which will be mounted here, or there's suction feed, which is from below. Now suction feed is normally good for large amounts of paint, but I prefer gravity feed because it gives a more consistent flow of the paint all the way, even when you've finished all your paint. With gravity feed and side feed, because they're relying on suction to pull the paint, you can have inconsistent flow when you're actually low on paint. So this is my preferred method. And also, being on the top, there's less chances of it actually bumping into anything, because when you've got a cup down below and you want to get close, it might be in the way of things. But across the top here, it stays out of the way, and I think it's pretty well balanced too. Okay, let's have a closer look at the other features we mentioned. So we've got a stopper here, which is a preset, and what that does is, when it comes straight out of the box, it's already been preset a little bit. Now if I hold that at where it's preset, and this is a little screw, and allows you to lock this into place for maximum amounts of movement. So if we want maximum, we'll unscrew this, and you'll see how the trigger can actually go back now. And I think that's as far back as it will go. And you can see how much movement we have here now. So that's full throw. So you're getting from zero paint to the full 0.3 mil of the nozzle. Now what happens is, if you're doing a lot of fine work and you don't want to accidentally, or have the chance of accidentally bumping it and having a whole heap of paint come out, if we screw that in, that's restricting the movement. So it's gone back to about where I had it before, and then we can screw it down even further. And you see how there's very little movement now here. And that'll be a good setup if you're doing, say, dot type camouflage on an aircraft, or even just really fine work. Even if you're only doing faces on, say, a wargaming figure. You don't want to accidentally bump it, and that'll be the maximum amount of movement you'll be able to get. So in a way, it relieves tension on your fingers as well, because you don't have to always balance it. You can always just pull it back to the maximum you want to go and then press down. All right, so that's what the preset's all about. All right, let's dismantle this and see what everything looks like. All right, so we can take the cap off for the cup, like so. So just pressure fit. And from this point, you can see that breather hole much easier. So if you're using the cap, the breather hole needs to be always open. It is quite small, so it can be easy to actually have that blocked with paint if you're not careful, and it won't spray properly unless there is a breather hole in there. Okay, so I'll put that there. From there, we'll take the handle off. Just unscrews. Like so. And then we've got the little locking nut here, which locks the needle onto the trigger mechanism. As you can see it moving. You just undo that slightly. Doesn't need to come off, and then you'll be able to slide the needle out. So it releases the needle there. Be very careful at the end, because you don't want to bend the needle, because the end is very, very sharp, and that's the part that's going to give you all your fine lines. If you do bend that, it'll start blowing in a particular angle which you don't want. Okay, from there we've got the needle cap. So it just unscrews. And then we've got the nozzle cap, which covers up the nozzle. Like so. I'm going to do a bit of zooming in to give you a quick look, but this is a pretty common design nozzle. A lot of Japanese type airbrushes, Iwaras say, a design like this, and it's just at a very end point, which is the nozzle. So that's very important, you don't want to damage that. And these nozzles are very well matched to the taper which is on the needle. Now you can see how small that end is, so that's the 0.3 mil part of it, right on the end there. And here's the tool that you use for removing the nozzle. And you only remove the nozzles when you need to clean here. Occasionally you have dried paint that will get blocked there, and you'll need to actually blow it through the other way to clear it. So you'll need to match this up. Let's get the focus a bit better, as I've got the height difference. Now you see that the spanner has the flats. You need to match that up with the flats of the nozzle. It's a bit hard for me to see there because I'm trying to film at the same time. There you go, like so. Now I'm not going to undo it, but you turn it anti-clockwise to undo this. And once you've basically undone it lightly, you remove the nozzle with your fingers, so there's less chances of damaging it. And when you're putting it back on, after you've cleaned it, use your fingers to screw it back on to the threads here, because the threads are very fine. And once it's as tight as you can with your finger, you put back the spanner and you tighten it up the slightest amount. And if we're talking about a clock, it might even be like 1 o'clock, or even less than that. The slightest amount, because if you use too much power, you'll break the very fine threads, and they're almost impossible to get out. And it's a nozzle and the needle which will be the parts that you will most likely replace in the lifetime of your airbrush, because they will naturally wear as you've got the movement of the needle going in and out of the nozzle. And as it wears, the nozzle will get bigger, it'll be less smooth, which means your spraying pattern will change and be not as precise as was brand new. But that's one of those maintenance things of an airbrush. Alright, so if we still zoom, we can have a close look at everything. You're picking up all my fingerprints now, but that's what happens with some nice thick chrome. That'll all wipe off very easily. So it's easy to clean, even if you've got paint overspray. There's your Sparmax Max-3, which is laser etched. The code there as well. You see the trigger action. So you can see how there's slight movement and then full movement. So all in between there, you'll be able to adjust it from 0 pressure to the full pressure that you set on your compressor. And then pulling it back will control the needle within the nozzle. There we go, there's a knurl which holds the needle back in place. Okay, so let's put this all back together. Now let's put the nozzle cover. It screws back on. And then we have the cap. Actually, I won't put the cap on yet. I'll put in the needle so you can see it actually protruding. So I won't normally do this. This is just for a demonstration. I'll prefer to put the cap on first so that when you put the needle in, there's no chances of it getting damaged. So over here we have the knurled nut which holds the needle. I got my finger there just to guide the ends of the needle in because I don't want that to bend at all. This is going straight. And then as we push it in, you feel that it's just homed in on the nozzle, and just give it the slightest tap to make sure it's homed in. You don't want to force that because otherwise it's going to force your nozzle to go really wide and you won't have a very good finish after that. Okay, so there we go. And then on the other side you can see the needle protruding. Okay, so that's homed in on the nozzle, and as I pull back the trigger you'll see the needle retracting. And that's how you control the paint flow. And this is also why it's very important, I think, to have the nozzle cap on, or the needle cap. A lot of people, you'll see them on YouTube and other types of media where they take it off because they say you can see where the needle is and you've got better control and you can see where it's going. That might be the case with really fine stuff, but there's such a risk of bending that I'd rather not do that. So just make sure you put on the cap. Now what I'm going to do is, I always like to retract the needle so there's no chances of accidentally bending it or damaging it. We'll put the nozzle back in, or the cap back in place, and then I'll release the needle, and that's all safe. So even if you bump it into things, it's not going to damage the needle. Okay, so with all that together, what is there left? Well, there's the handle and the cap, and that's back together. But before we call it a day, let me show you what the optional valve will do. So let's just pop that there. I'll put on this quick release so I can connect it up to my hose. Now, these quick releases are very handy, and they're available from 9 steps. And if I hold that there, we'll plug it into, I've got my quick release which also has a MAC valve. That's connected up to an optional filter here as well. So there's another water filter and dust trap. And we'll just hook this up. And there we go, that's all hooked up, ready to use. Now as we press, that's controlling the air pressure. Now let's see if I can do this. If you press it gently, you'll get less air. It's a bit hard to do while I'm trying to film, I guess. Let me see, I'll put it up to my microphone. So I'm trying to gently press it down and so you can hear. So that's low pressure, that's high pressure. Okay, and between all this you will be able to adjust it. So it's very low, So it's very low, a bit higher, full. And so that's what you can do with this particular air pressure control. And that's pretty standard, and that's what I prefer. Now the optional item, which I'll just quickly plug in, let's take this off. So I'm taking off my quick adapter part, and then we'll take off the adjustable valve. And you'll see the valve, you see that's the point where it controls the air pressure. And when I bring over the optional part, you'll see that there's no valve parts at all, it's just fully open. Now we'll screw that on. Put our quick release back on. And now when we connect it, air pressure is always on. There's no control on the air at all here. And you just hear my compressors just kicked in to pump up the tank, because basically it's just releasing all the pressure now. But you do have control of the paint flow. And you see I can't pull it back much because I've actually locked it down from the preset, but if I open this all the way, you'll be able to control the paint with the needle control there. But there's no control of the air. So that's meant to make it easier for you. Now if you do have one of these quick releases which has actually got the MAC valve on it, you will be able to adjust the air pressure. So if I screw that all the way in, that's stopped the air from being supplied. Then as you screw this out, you can screw it so that there's less air or more air. So I guess it's up to you. That's an option that's available. I prefer to have the other valve because there's more control, but that's up to you. So that's included in the kit of the MAX-3. And I'll just take this off, and it's very easy to change. And this is the part which they described on the box before as 1/8 thread. That's quite a common size for hoses. We'll take this valve off and put back the fully adjustable valve. Just like that, easy. So this is my review of the Sparmax Max-3 0.3mm airbrush. Very well priced. It's got the end stop or preset as well, which is a handy feature. And it's quite a nicely made airbrush. So there we go. So if you like this review, please give me a like below. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please think about subscribing. So thank you for joining me.